Marcus thought he was untouchable. He'd stolen his brother's entire inheritance with forged documents and lies. 5 years later, he was dying, and the only person who could save him? The brother he destroyed. Sometimes karma doesn't just knock, it performs surgery. This is the story of two brothers, a betrayal that shattered a family and the moment when life forced the ultimate choice. What would you do if the person who stole everything from you was dying in your hands? David and Marcus Chen grew up in San Francisco's Chinatown. Their parents owned a small restaurant that barely paid the bills, but they had dreams. Big dreams. Their father worked 16-hour days, their mother counted every penny, all so their boys could have the American dream they never got. David was the older brother. Quiet, studious, responsible. He helped in the restaurant after school, translated documents for his parents, handled the books. Marcus was different, charming, charismatic, always talking his way out of trouble. Their parents adored him, the golden child who could do no wrong. When their father died suddenly of a heart attack, everything changed. The restaurant, the small apartment building they'd bought as an investment, the life insurance, all of it went to David. Not because their parents loved Marcus less, but because David had been handling the family finances for years. He was the responsible one, the one they trusted. The will was clear. David would inherit everything, with the understanding that he'd take care of Marcus and their aging mother. It wasn't about favoritism. It was about responsibility. Marcus didn't see it that way. "This is bullshit, David," Marcus said the day after the funeral, pacing their childhood living room like a caged animal. "I'm his son too. I deserve half of everything." David tried to explain. The restaurant was struggling. Their mother needed care. The inheritance wasn't a lottery ticket, it was a burden wrapped in responsibility. But Marcus wasn't listening. He was calculating. 3 months later, David discovered what his brother had done. Marcus had been busy. While David grieved and tried to keep the restaurant afloat, Marcus had been visiting their parents' old lawyer. He'd brought documents, forged documents, a new will, backdated, that split everything 50-50. Their father's signature, perfectly copied from old business papers Marcus had stolen from the restaurant office. The lawyer was old, trusting. He'd known the family for years. When Marcus showed up with tears in his eyes talking about how their father had changed his mind before he died, how he'd felt guilty about leaving Marcus out, the lawyer believed him. By the time David found out, it was too late. Marcus had already sold his half of the restaurant to a competitor. He'd liquidated his portion of the investment properties. He'd taken his share of the life insurance and disappeared to Los Angeles with a check for $300,000. David was left with debt, a dying business, and a mother who couldn't understand why her sons were no longer speaking. The legal fees to fight the forged will cost more than David could afford. The lawyer who'd been deceived felt terrible but couldn't undo what had been done. The money was gone. Marcus was gone. Their mother died 6 months later, heartbroken and confused, asking for Marcus until her last breath. He didn't come to the funeral. David buried her alone. That was 5 years ago. David rebuilt slowly. He sold what was left of the restaurant, went back to school, became a nurse. It wasn't the life he'd planned, but it was honest work. He helped people. He saved lives. At night, he tried not to think about Marcus. Tried not to wonder what their parents would think about what had happened to their family. Marcus, meanwhile, had been living large in Beverly Hills. The money bought him a condo, expensive cars, designer clothes. He started a consulting business that was mostly smoke and mirrors. He dated models, threw parties, lived like he was invincible. He never called David, he never asked about their mother, he never looked back. Until the day he started getting sick. It started with fatigue, then the swelling, the shortness of breath. When Marcus finally dragged himself to a doctor, the news hit him like a freight train. Kidney disease, advanced, aggressive. Without treatment, he had months to live. The irony was perfect. All that money he'd stolen, all those years of excess, and now he needed something money couldn't buy. He needed a donor. He needed family. The tests came back one by one. His friends, his girlfriend, his business partners, none of them were matches. The waiting list for a kidney was years long. Time he didn't have. There was only one person left to test. David, can you imagine that phone call? After 5 years of silence, 5 years of betrayal, Marcus had to dial his brother's number and ask for the ultimate favor. Not money this time, not forgiveness, his life. David, it's Marcus. His voice was different, weak, scared. I need to see you. I'm sick, really sick. They met at a coffee shop in neutral territory. David barely recognized his brother. The golden boy who'd stolen his inheritance looked hollow, gray, dying. Marcus explained everything: the kidney disease, the failed matches, the desperate need for a donor. You're the only family I have left, Marcus said, and the irony hung in the air between them like smoke. David sat in silence for a long time. He thought about their parents, about the restaurant they'd lost, about their mother dying alone asking for the son who never came, about 5 years of struggle while Marcus lived high on stolen money. You want me to give you a kidney, David said slowly, after what you did to our family. Marcus nodded, tears in his eyes. I know I don't deserve it. I know what I did was wrong. But I'm dying, David. I'm your brother. Here's what Marcus didn't know. David had already been tested. The moment Marcus called, David had gone to the hospital and gotten his blood work done. He was a perfect match. Of course he was. They were brothers. But David didn't tell him that. Not yet. Instead, David made Marcus wait for weeks. While Marcus got sicker, weaker, more desperate, David took his time. He went to work, saved other people's lives, and let his brother sweat. Let him wonder. Let him feel what it was like to have his fate in someone else's hands. Marcus called every day, texted, left voicemails that grew more and more panicked. David, please, I know I screwed up. I'll pay you back somehow. I'll make it right. Just please get tested. Finally, David agreed to meet him again. This time, Marcus could barely walk to the coffee shop. His face was puffy from the treatments. His skin had a yellow tinge. He was dying, and everyone could see it. I got tested, David said quietly. I'm a match. The relief on Marcus's face was immediate, overwhelming. He started to cry, reaching across the table to grab David's hand. Thank you. Thank you. I knew you wouldn't let me die. I knew. I didn't say I was going to do it, David interrupted. The silence that followed was deafening. I want you to understand something, David continued, his voice steady as a surgeon's hand. When you stole that money, you didn't just steal from me. You stole from Mom. You stole her last years of peace. You stole her chance to see her sons together. You killed her as surely as if you'd put a gun to her head. Marcus was sobbing now. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I was young and stupid and selfish. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. The rest of your life, David repeated, which is about 6 weeks without a transplant. That's when Marcus realized he wasn't talking to the same brother who used to cover for him as a kid. This David was different, harder, tested by years of loss and betrayal. This David held his life in his hands and might just let it slip through his fingers. But here's the thing about David: he wasn't his brother. He couldn't let someone die, even someone who destroyed everything he loved. It went against everything he was, everything their parents had raised him to be. I'll do it, David said finally, but not for you, for Mom and Dad, because they would have wanted me to save their son even after what he did. The surgery was scheduled for the following week. Marcus cried with relief. He promised to change, to make amends, to be the brother David deserved. David nodded and said nothing. The night before the operation, David sat by his window looking out at the city lights. Tomorrow he would give part of himself to save the person who'd taken everything from him. It wasn't justice in the traditional sense. It wasn't revenge. It was something else entirely. It was mercy. And sometimes mercy is the most powerful form of karma there is. The surgery went perfectly. David's kidney found a new home in Marcus's body and began working immediately. Marcus would live. David would recover fully. The doctors called it a medical success. But here's the twist nobody saw coming. 3 days after the surgery, while Marcus was still recovering, a lawyer knocked on David's hospital room door. It turned out the competitor who'd bought Marcus's half of the restaurant had been investigated for money laundering. All his assets were being seized, including the restaurant purchase. The money Marcus had received was considered proceeds of fraud, and since the original will was provably forged, everything was being returned to David. Every penny. Plus 5 years of interest. Marcus learned about this from his hospital bed, watching the news report with his mouth open. The brother he'd betrayed, the brother who'd just saved his life, was getting everything back. The golden boy who thought he was so clever had been undone by criminals even smarter than him. David visited Marcus one last time before they were both discharged. Marcus tried to apologize again, tried to explain, tried to make promises about the future. David listened quietly, then stood to leave. "Marcus," David said at the door, "you're alive because I chose mercy over revenge. But don't mistake mercy for weakness, and don't mistake a second chance for a third one." As David walked away, Marcus finally understood. His brother hadn't just saved his life. He'd taught him that some debts can never be repaid, only forgiven. And forgiveness, real forgiveness, isn't about the person being forgiven. It's about the person choosing to let go. Marcus would spend the rest of his life carrying the weight of David's kidney and the knowledge of what his brother had sacrificed for him. Every beat of his heart would remind him of mercy he didn't deserve. And David? David went home to his apartment, richer than he'd been in years, but more importantly, free. Free from anger. Free from the burden of hate. Free to live the life his parents had always wanted for him. Karma doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like a hospital bed and a second chance. Sometimes the greatest revenge is simply being the person your parents raised you to be, even when the world gives you every reason not to be. If you believe that mercy is stronger than revenge and that karma never forgets, subscribe and we'll see you in the next story.